I am not a man who kneels. In 20 years of holding Varenhold, 20 years of iron winters and rival packs testing the frozen river border, I have not knelt to a single living thing. Not to grief, not to loss, not to the 3 alphas who came before me and tried to take the hold by treaty or by blood. Varenhold does not bow. I do not bow. That is the first thing any wolf in this kingdom learns. I am thinking about this now, standing in the great hall, watching Sova carry a stack of mended furs to the south window where the light is best. She doesn't know I'm watching. She rarely notices anything that isn't immediately in front of her. A loose thread, a draft from a cracked shutter, Kern's water bowl running low. She moves through the hold the way water moves, finding the places that need her, filling them quietly, asking nothing in return. I knelt to her 8 days ago, in front of my entire pack. I am still thinking about it. Let me go back to the beginning, to the border, to the ambush, to the moment I crested the frozen ridge and saw what I saw, because until you understand that moment, nothing else makes sense. Not the mark on my wrist, not the bloodseer's reading, not what I did afterward. It starts there in the snow. My elder wolf Kern had gone to the river border at dawn. He does this sometimes, old habit, old instinct, checks the boundary lines the same way he has for 15 years, his gray muzzle low, his breath steaming in the cold. I knew he'd gone. I didn't follow immediately. I should have. The southern rival packs had been pushing closer for 3 weeks, probing, withdrawing, probing again in the way of wolves who are waiting for the moment to matter. I knew something was building. I had sent 3 of my fastest to watch the crossing, and I had believed that was enough. I was wrong. I felt it before I heard it, a pressure in the air, the wrong kind of silence from the tree line. I was already running when the sound reached me, a snarl cut short, the crack of bodies in snow. I covered the distance in under a minute, shifted on the run, and came over the ridge in human form because I needed to see clearly, needed to assess before I acted, and what I saw stopped me cold. 3 of them. Rival wolves from the Stenvrak pack, big, well-fed, their pack markings freshly inked, had Kern surrounded. My elder wolf was on his side in the snow. Even from 30 yards I could see the wound in his flank, dark against the white ground. Kern is old. He is the oldest wolf in Varenhold, the one who remembered my father's father, who has been at the side of every alpha this hold has known. He should not have been there alone. He should not have been on his side in the snow. He was trying to rise, and his legs were not answering him, and the 3 Stenvrak wolves were circling slowly with the patient, casual cruelty of wolves who believe the outcome is already decided. Standing between them and Kern was a woman. She was not pack. I knew every face in Varenhold, and I did not know hers. She was dressed plainly, a brown wool traveling coat, thick boots, a pack slung from one shoulder, the gear of someone who walks between holds and sleeps where shelter finds her. She was not large. She was not armed with anything that should have given 3 grown rival wolves any pause whatsoever. She held a hunting blade, the small kind, the kind you carry for utility, not combat, and she was holding it in a 2-handed grip with her right arm pressed tight against her body in a way that meant the arm was hurt. The Stenvrak wolves were not moving on Kern, because she was standing there. I learned later from Kern, when he was well enough to tell me, that she had come upon the ambush from the tree line on the opposite side. She had been walking the river road, a packless wanderer passing through, no claim on anyone in this territory, no reason whatsoever to insert herself between 3 rival wolves and an elder she had never met. Kern had been down less than a minute. The Stenvrak wolves had been closing, and this woman had walked directly into the space between them and laid her hand on Kern's flank and said, very quietly, "Back away." They had not backed away. Instead, the largest had lunged, not at her, at Kern, and she had moved. That was when she took the blade. Not her hunting blade, theirs. The Stenvrak wolves carry iron at the border, a practice my father banned in our territory and that their alpha has always quietly ignored. She had seen the blade, and she had moved, and it had caught her high in the shoulder, through the wool coat, and she had not stepped back. She had stayed, between Kern and the three of them. When I came over the ridge, she had been standing there for perhaps 2 minutes with a wound in her shoulder and 3 wolves watching her, and she had not moved, and Kern had not been touched again. I crossed the distance fast. The Stenvrak wolves knew me, knew my face, knew the Varenhold marking, and they read what was coming well enough to shift and run before I reached them. Good. I would find them through their alpha and deal with it through the proper channels, which would be brief and final. Later. Right now I had Kern. I went to my knee in the snow beside him. He was breathing shallow but steady. The flank wound was serious but clean. He would live. I knew he would live the way I know the weight of stone and the smell of ice melt. Kern has survived worse. I pressed my hand to the wound and looked up. The woman was still standing. Her arm was still pressed to her body. There was more blood than I had seen from across the ridge, dark against the brown wool, and she was watching me with an expression I could not immediately name. Not fear, not relief, not the look of someone calculating what they'd just done and what it might be worth. She looked like someone who had done the only sensible thing available and was now patiently waiting to see what came next. "Sit down," I said. "I'm fine," she said. "You are not fine. Sit down. The wolf needs the attention first." I looked at her for a moment. "The wolf is being attended to. Sit down." She sat. Not because I told her to, I could see that clearly enough, but because her body had decided the immediate crisis was over and was now submitting its honest accounting of what the last few minutes had cost it. She lowered herself to the snow carefully, still with that arm pressed close, and her face went a shade paler but stayed composed. That was the moment. I did not understand it yet. I do not think I could have understood it yet, standing in that snow with blood on both hands and an elder wolf breathing shallowly at my knee. But my mark, the mark on my wrist that every alpha of Varenhold carries, the old blood sign that the seer Marin had told me since my 7th year would one day burn for a mate, a mark that had lain quiet my entire life, through every woman my counsel had ever put in front of me, burned. Hot, clean, and unmistakable. I looked at my wrist, then I looked at her. She was looking at Kern. I did not say anything. I filed it away somewhere deep, behind the more immediate business of getting 2 wounded living things back to the hold before the temperature dropped further, and I focused on what needed doing. I carried Kern. He is large, even old, even wounded. Kern is the size of a small cart horse when shifted, and he refused to shift back to manage his own weight, which told me the wound was worse than I'd assessed, and he didn't want me to see his face when he tried. Old wolf. Too much pride. I got him over my shoulders in the fireman's carry I had been doing since I was large enough to manage him, which he accepted with enormous dignity and what I am fairly certain was a private sound of relief. The woman walked beside me. I told her to let me come back for her after I'd settled Kern. She looked at me with the same calm patience she'd been deploying since I'd arrived and kept walking. Her pace was steady. Her color was poor. She didn't complain about either. "What is your name?" I said. This is not how I usually begin conversations, but circumstances were not usual. "Sova. Pack. No pack." I looked at her sideways as we walked. In the north, traveling alone without pack affiliation is not uncommon. Healers do it. Traders do it. Some wolves who have lost their pack to illness or dissolution do it for years before finding a new place. It carries its own dignity if you carry it right. She carried it right. "What were you doing on the river road?" "Walking south. I was told there's a hold at the river bend that sometimes needs hands in winter." She meant Varenhold. Packless wanderers sometimes came to us for the season, honest work, fair treatment, no questions about origin. My steward Aldis arranged it. She had not known whose hold it was when she walked into the middle of its elder wolf's ambush. "Did you know whose wolf you were standing over?" I asked. No, she said. I knew it was old and it was hurt and there were 3 of them. That was all. No calculation, no claim, no expectation of what it might return to her. 3 wolves, 1 old wolf down, and a woman with a hunting blade she barely knew how to hold standing in the gap. My mark burned all the way back to the hold. Kern was installed in the warmest room we had, which is the room adjacent to mine, which had never been used for anything except storage and the occasional reading of old documents by candlelight. My healer Osvin spent the first hour with him and came out saying what I already knew. The wound was serious but clean. The wolf was strong. He needed warmth and rest and a week's quiet. Sova was put in a chamber on the opposite wing. Osvin saw to her shoulder and reported back to me. The blade had gone clean through the upper muscle, narrowly clear of anything that mattered. A few weeks and she'd have full use of the arm again. She had, Osvin added in his dry way, been extraordinarily calm about the entire process of having it cleaned and closed. I stood outside her chamber door at the 3rd hour of the night. I don't know what I was doing there, precisely. I had no particular reason to be standing in that corridor. The hold was quiet. The night watch was posted. There was nothing that required the Alpha of Varenhold to be on the eastern wing at 3 in the morning. I was there because I had gone to check on Kern, and Kern had raised his great gray head and turned it in the direction of the eastern wing, and laid it back down with an expression that I can only describe as knowing, and I had found myself walking. I stood outside her door for perhaps 10 minutes. I did not go in. She needed rest. I needed to think. I walked back to my own chambers and sat with the candle until dawn, looking at my wrist. The mark was quiet now, not blazing the way it had in the snow, but present, warm. A low, continuous warmth I had never felt there before, a steadiness, as if something that had been waiting a long time had finally settled into its proper orientation and was in no hurry to explain itself. I thought about what Maren had told me, years ago. The Bloodseer of Varenhold is a woman of 63 years who has held the position since before I was Alpha, who was held by the Alpha before me, who reads the old Pack Chronicles with a scholar's care and gives counsel with the precision of a blade. She had read me the passage when I was newly Alpha, 20 years old and freshly marked with the wrist sign, and she had said it plainly. The Alpha's true mate will be proven not by blood or rank, but by act. The seer text says, "She who shields the hold's heart without claim upon it, she is the one the moon chose before either of them were born." She who shields the hold's heart. Kern is the hold's heart. Every wolf in Varenhold has known it for 15 years. I had heard Maren's reading. I had noted it. I had also spent 20 years not meeting anyone who made the mark so much as flicker, and I had quietly, privately, largely stopped expecting it. You can believe in a prophecy the way you believe in the weather. You know it's coming. You know it's real, and you still go about your life as if it has nothing particular to do with you. My mark had burned. My mark had never done anything before that afternoon. I sat with the candle until the light outside changed and the first watch called, and then I went to see Kern. Kern was awake. He looked better. The shallow, careful breathing of the night before had smoothed into something deeper, more assured. He lifted his head when I came in and held it steadily, which was itself a relief. I sat beside him on the floor the way I have since I was a boy, and he was in his prime, and I was still learning what it meant to be Alpha. "How do you feel?" I said. He gave me the look that means, "How do you think?" "She's sleeping," I said. "Osvin says she'll be fine." He held my eyes for a moment. Then he shifted, slow, careful, working through the wound's inconvenience, and laid his great gray head on my knee. This is not something Kern does. Kern is affectionate in his own way, which is to say he is present, and his presence has always been enough. The gesture was unusual. It was also, from him, unambiguous. "I know," I said. He made a quiet sound and closed his eyes. The pack's reaction to Sova was not simple. This is the truth about wolf packs. They are loyal and they are suspicious, and these qualities live in the same breath. Varenhold had been my pack for 20 years and they trusted my judgment, but they were also wolves, which meant that an unknown woman appearing suddenly in their hold, packless, no affiliation, having been carried in from a border ambush the specifics of which were still emerging, was a thing to be watched. Questions moved through the hold the way cold air moves under a door. Who was she? Where had she come from? What was she doing on the river road? Why had she interfered and what did she want for it? Sova, for her part, gave them very little to work with. She was up by the second day, moving carefully, her arm in a sling that she treated as a minor administrative inconvenience. She asked my steward Aldis for something useful to do. Aldis, who has managed the hold's logistics for 11 years, and who maintains an expression of permanent mild skepticism about everything except inventory, gave her the mending pile. She sat in the south window for 3 days and worked through it with the focus of someone who has spent a great deal of time in a similar position and finds it genuinely satisfying. She did not ask me for anything. She did not seek me out, did not position herself in my sight, did not perform the careful, deliberate social work of someone who has done a significant thing and wants credit for it. When she and I were in the same room, which happened more than I had planned, because I found myself finding reasons to be in whatever room she was in, she met my eyes simply, without expectation, and went back to what she was doing. My mark was warm, constantly, every waking hour, and I suspected the sleeping ones too. On the 4th day, I sat beside her at the south window. "The arm," I said. "Improving," she said, without looking up from the seam she was working. "Osvin looked at it this morning." "Good." A silence. Outside, the snow was coming down, the second heavy fall of the season, the kind that settles in and means business. "You could have walked away," I said. She did look up then. Her eyes are a particular color, gray with something warmer underneath, the way certain stones look in moving water. She looked at me steadily, the way she does everything. "He was down," she said. "There were 3 of them. He wasn't yours to protect." She considered this. "No," she said, "I suppose not." A pause. "Does it matter?" I didn't answer immediately. Something was happening in my chest that I didn't have clean language for, a kind of pressure. The sort that comes when you've been carrying something for a very long time, and someone has just moved it slightly, and you realize how heavy it has been. "No," I said, "I don't suppose it does." We sat there in the snowlight for a while after that. She went back to the mending. I watched the snow. On the 5th day, Kern walked to her room. This is notable for several reasons, the first being that Kern was not supposed to be walking yet. Osvin had been very clear about a week's rest, and Kern had accepted this mandate with the dignified patience of a wolf who intends to do exactly what he wants when the healer isn't watching. The second reason is that Kern does not go to people. People come to Kern. This is simply how it has always been, from as long as anyone in the hold can remember. Even I go to him. Even my father went to him. He walked to her room, and when I found them an hour later, because I had noticed Kern's room was quiet and had a very specific feeling in my chest about where he had gone. He was lying at the foot of her bed with his head in her lap, and she was reading, her good hand resting on the gray fur of his neck as if she had been doing this her whole life. She looked up when I appeared in the doorway. "I hope this is all right," she said. "He's never done that before," I said. She looked down at Kern. He had not moved, had not opened an eye, had not so much as shifted his weight in acknowledgement that I was standing 2 yards away. Kern, who notices everything. "He seems comfortable," she said. "Yes," I said, "he does." I stood in that doorway for a moment longer than was strictly necessary, and then I went back to the business of being Alpha of Varenhold, which was somewhat harder than usual. My pack began to shift their position on the 7th day. Not all at once, not loudly, But wolves communicate in the smaller things: who moves aside to let you pass, who meets your eyes, who makes room at the table for your bowl. By the seventh day, when Sova walked to the evening meal, Ran, my second, a woman not given to casual warmth, moved her plate along the bench to make room. By the eighth morning, Davar, the youngest of my senior wolves, had found a reason to be near the south window. By that afternoon, two of them had asked her questions about her travels, genuine questions, the kind you ask someone you're deciding to know. Kern was the signal. They all understood Kern the way they all understand the river. It's been there their whole lives. It has never steered them wrong, and when it changes direction, you pay attention. The Stenvrak situation had been dealt with. I had sent word to their alpha with a clarity and specificity that left no ambiguity about how the next approach would be received, and I had received in return a careful, formal acknowledgement that conveyed genuine fear behind the diplomatic language. The border had been quiet for 4 days. I had been sleeping badly. Not because of the border, not because of anything practical. Because I was lying awake thinking about a woman in the south wing who had walked between 3 wolves and a dying elder without hesitating, who asked nothing for it, who sat in my south window mending seams with the calm of someone who has made her peace with the world being what it is. Because my mark was warm every night and every morning and every hour of the day between. Because I had known since I was 20 years old that there was a passage in the old Pack Chronicle, and I had never taken it fully seriously, and I was now extremely aware that I had been wrong about that. On the morning of the 8th day, I went to Marin. Marin's rooms are at the north end of the hold, which she has always claimed has the best light for reading and the worst cold, and that this is simply the bargain she has made with the stones. She was at her chronicle table when I came in, as she almost always is, surrounded by the particular disorder of someone who knows exactly where everything is, and whose system would be ruined by anyone else's attempt at order. She looked up at me and then looked at my wrist, and something in her expression settled. "You already know," I said. "I've been waiting for you to come to me," she said. "Sit down, Aldrin." I sat. She turned back to the chronicle she'd been reading. I could see it was old, older than most in the collection, the binding repaired 3 times. She found the page without searching for it, which told me she had been reading it already, probably for days. "The passage," I said. "Yes," she read it aloud. She has a voice for reading, she always has, since I was a boy, and she read to me in the same room, my father's pack-seer reading to his son the history of Varenhold, so that it would be in my bones before I needed it. She read slowly, and each line landed. "She who comes without claim upon the hold, who shields the hold's heart when 3 stand against 1, who does not step back when the blade finds her, she is not chosen by the Alpha's eye. She was chosen before either of them drew breath. The moon mark on the Alpha's wrist will burn at first sight of her, and will not quiet until she is named." The hall was silent. "It burned," I said, "in the snow, the moment I looked at her." "I know," Marin said. "Kern told me." I looked at her. "Kern told you." "He came to see me 2 nights ago. He was very clear." I thought about Kern walking to Sova's room, Kern lying with his head in her lap, Kern communicating his findings to the Bloodseer of Varenhold via whatever private channel 15-year-old wolves and pack-seers maintain. I felt something that might have been the first moment of lightness I had experienced in 8 days. "She doesn't know," I said. "No," Marin agreed. "She wouldn't. She had no reason to know the Varenhold Chronicle. She didn't know whose wolf Kern was." "I know. She walked into it without knowing anything." "Yes," Marin said. "That's rather the point, isn't it?" I sat there for a moment with that. The point. She who comes without claim, who does not step back, she had no claim to press, no knowledge to calculate from, no strategic reason to stand in that gap. She had done it because there was an old wolf on his side in the snow and 3 wolves closing in, and she had the only body available. That was all. That was apparently everything. I asked Marin to come to the Great Hall that evening. I asked my full pack to gather, all of them, from Ran and Davar and my senior wolves down to the youngest. I sent word to Sova through Aldis, phrased simply. The Alpha requested her presence in the hall. She came in her traveling coat, which she had repaired herself at some point in the past week. Her arm was still in its sling. She stood inside the hall doorway and looked at the assembled pack, and then looked at me with that steady, waiting expression that I had come to understand meant she was prepared for whatever was coming and had no particular attachment to any specific version of it. I looked at her across the hall. My mark burned, clean, steady, and certain. Marin read the passage. She stood at the center of the hall and she read it from the old chronicle, her voice carrying to every corner the way it always has, and the hall was absolutely silent. I watched Sova as she listened. I watched the moment the words reached her. She didn't move, didn't react in any visible way, but something in her face shifted, very slightly, like a stone that has been leaning against another stone for a long time and has just settled to a new angle. When Marin finished, I walked across the hall. In 20 years I have not knelt to a living thing. The floor of the great hall is cold stone, and it is not comfortable, and I am not young, and I went down on one knee in front of her anyway, and it was the easiest thing I had done in 20 years. I took my cloak, the Varenhold Alpha's cloak, black wool with the iron thread border, the one my father's father wore, and I laid it around her shoulders. The hall was silent. And then it was not silent, because one by one, beginning with Ran, then Davar, then the rest in the order that their hearts moved them, Varenhold knelt. Sova looked at me. I looked at her. "You didn't know whose wolf it was," I said. "No," she said, "I told you that." "I know." A pause. The hall was very still. "Does it matter?" she asked. Again, the same question she had asked me at the south window 4 days earlier. "No," I said, "that's exactly why." She looked at me for a long moment with those gray eyes that have something warmer underneath. Then she looked at Kern, who had somehow arrived at the front of the pack without anyone noticing him move, and who was sitting with the particular patient satisfaction of a wolf who has been right about something for several days and is only now being publicly acknowledged. She reached out with her good hand and rested it briefly on his great gray head. "I see," she said. A month later, she is at the south window carrying furs. I am standing across the hall, watching, and I am thinking about the fact that I do not kneel, and that I knelt, and that I would do it again without hesitation on any morning of the rest of my life. I am thinking about what it cost her, the shoulder, the blade, the 3 wolves, the cold, and that she paid it for an old wolf she had never met on a road she was merely passing through. I am thinking about the difference between being chosen and being found. I spent 20 years waiting, in the particular way of a man who has mostly stopped waiting, for something the passage in the old chronicle promised. I imagined it many ways. I did not imagine it coming on a river road in the early snow, arriving without announcement, asking nothing for itself. Kern is in the great hall today, recovered, moving well, insufferably pleased with himself in the quiet way he has. He is lying on the warm stones near the iron brazier, watching Sova the way he watched me at her age. I understand now that this is simply what Kern does. He watches the things that matter. He has always watched the things that matter. Sova sets down the last of the furs and turns, and she sees me watching, and she does not look away the way most people look away from their alpha. She simply looks back, steady, without performance. She will be officially named at the solstice ceremony. Marin is preparing the rites. The pack, even the last of the skeptical ones, even the 3 who took the longest to make room at the bench, has quietly and completely made peace with it. There was no announcement required. There rarely is when a thing is simply true. I crossed the hall. I have learned in the past month that she prefers to be approached directly, not circled the way wolves sometimes circle one another when they are working something out. She prefers the direct line, the clear word. She will say what she means if you give her space to say it. "How is the arm?" I ask. "Nearly full," she says. "Another week." "Good." A pause. Outside, the snow is falling again, the soft kind, the kind that stacks on the pine branches and stays. In 3 weeks, Varenhold will be buried in it, and we will be most of the way through the hardest month, and Sova will have been here for most of it, and I will have spent a great deal of that time finding reasons to be in whatever room she is in. "You're watching me a great deal," she says. "Yes." "Is there something you want to say?" "There are many things I want to say. I have never been a man with many words. I was built for decisions, for action, for the weight of the stone and the cold of the river, not for the particular language of what I am feeling, which is still large and ungainly, and something I am learning to carry." But she prefers the direct line. "Yes," I say. She waits. "I'm glad you were on the river road," I say. "I'm glad you were on the river road, and I'm glad Kern went to the border, and I'm glad the Stenvrak pack chose that morning, because I have been Alpha of Varenhold for 20 years, and I had stopped believing in the passage in the old chronicle, and I was wrong about that, and I would very much like the rest of my life to look like this." She is quiet for a moment. Then something happens to her face that I have not seen before. The calm is still there, the steadiness is still there, but underneath it, very briefly, something warm and unguarded surfaces, like the gray stones in the river when the water moves over them right. "That's a great deal of words," she says, "for a man who uses very few." "Yes." "I'll think about it," she says. And she goes back to the window. Kern from across the hall makes a small and very specific sound. I have known this wolf for 30 years, and I have a reliable sense of what his sounds mean. This one means, "You're going to be fine." I go back to being Alpha of Varenhold. Outside the snow falls, and the pine branches take its weight, and Sova sits in the south window where the light is best, and the mark on my wrist is warm and steady, and no longer waiting for anything.